So here's my plan for the summer. For those of you who want to stick around, I love doing this. I don't want to not be doing this. So rather than do what we've been doing with a lot of thinking and a lot of contextualizing, I would call it, art historicizing and all of that kind of stuff, I'm going to spend the whole summer doing demos. And I'm going to make myself disciplined to make them interesting. And so I mentioned last week, my plan is that each week I'm going to get everything that I'm talking about out in the first like 5 minutes. And in fact, the way it'll work is if you have 5 minutes, you'll get, or if you have 2 minutes, and you're watching the recording or whatever, you'll get the most important thing. Then if you have 15 minutes, you'll get kind of a little more. And if you've got the whole 45 minutes or whatever, you can hang out the entire time and watch and get like a more detailed explanation for what we're talking about. But this is basically, I went through my list. These are all the things I teach. I tried to narrow it to like the major important stuff. Some of these are design principles. Some of these are exercise based. Some of these are kind of get out of your comfort zone type things. So what I wanted to ask you guys is if you have ideas beyond this. Here, let me just quickly explain what these are. And these may not be in order. I don't know. I just kind of did them as they occurred to me. Tangents. This is very nerdy. The tangents to me is one of the like fully underestimated, underrepresented design tricks in painting and drawing that people tend to tell you not to do them, which is crazy. You should be I mean, it's such a great trick. And so we're going to talk about how all of that stuff works. And again, that would be one, like I'll do a quick little drawing right at the beginning, and then you can go about your merry way. And then if you want to stick around or if you want to fast forward in the recording. So I'm really trying for all of you, because I know we've been in this like time warp with COVID that we haven't really had to worry about that. For the most part, we're all just stuck at home. But now I'm double vaxxed. My family's double vaxxed. Many of you are double vaxxed. And we're kind of trying to reintegrate into society. So we're gonna do it this way. So there will be, for those of you who are just dying to sit around for an hour or two a week doing our class, there's still going to be that stuff there. But if you only have 5 minutes, you're going to get that little nugget right at the beginning. And so tangents, shape mapping. If you've been in any of my workshops, that's the first exercise we do. I love shape mapping exercises. It's very good for you also, even if you're an expressionist painter. Similar to what I was just doing, like that week that I did the demo, I made the star and then I kind of colored it in. It's like that. Cropping, super great trick without it being gimmicky. Massing and joining, that's one of the harder ones. If your brain hurts, you might want to skip that one. Mark making is super fun, expressionistic stuff. Then we'll have a whole month, I think this will be July, just on abstracting. I've had lots of requests for like abstracting the landscape, abstracting figure, still life, interior, and each week we'll just focus on one of those. Part of the beauty of that too is if you're an abstract painter, most abstract, I don't want to call them genres, but most abstract approaches are based on one of those four things. It's rare that you find an abstract painter that doesn't come from one of those. And if they don't, you tend not to be all that, it's like that mall abstraction. It doesn't stick. And so each week we'll talk about different modes of operation. We'll look at different artists who do landscape, figure, still life, interior. That's usually what we do in the summer anyway, is that abstract stuff. And so we'll approach it like expression. We'll use that mark making, we'll approach it expressionistically, geometrically, all of that kind of stuff. And then the big dumb shape, my favorite, put that on my tombstone someday when I'm dead. Here lies the big dumb shape. Simple is not easy. I'll just do a kind of recap of what we've been doing with simple is not easy and some finding your voice. Here are some maybes. Dominance, subordination, a little nerdy, but what we're going to talk about today, in fact. Some ideas on collage. I'm actually I'm doing that right now. I'm very interested in that. Clarity, obscurity, some distortion, subject matter and narrative, probably. is something a lot of you we've been talking about this in my Monday one-on-ones about that, and it seems like that would be something. So let's take about a minute. If you guys have other suggestions, I know one of them is probably going from small to large, or going from sketch to a painting, or like a Procreate to a painting. Yeah, collage will be cool, because I have this whole like theory, this whole art theory surrounding the idea of collage, and we never really get into it because it's there. Yeah, and small to large, I think that's always a favorite. I'll write that down. What else? Any other stuff you guys can think of? I tried to cover just about all the bases. I mean, this is 15 years of teaching all rolled into one summer. The idea being like, and I kind of want to make like a little video library of my kind of more meta things that I teach. And so, paint application, excellent, thanks, Anne. Yes, that could even be in layered styles, well, or in mark making too. But I will write that separately. Yes. Yeah, and you guys, if you think of something, working from memory. Thanks, SSB. That might come into on narrative and subject matter. I'm thinking I should move that into, that might be finding your voice. I should probably include that in there too. But for sure, painting from memory, or just the idea, we didn't get to all of the, yes, thank you, Debbie just predicted what I was about to say. We didn't get to all of the rules and how to break them. One big one being the reference. We'll talk about that today, as a matter of fact. That's one of our kind of questions of the week. Warm and cool color, absolutely. That's another dominance, subordination. I will tell you guys, I'm not the best teacher for color. I don't think about it much, and I don't care about it enough. Like, there are other folks out there who are probably a lot more, I mean, quite a few of you, in fact, who are a lot more well-versed and concerned with color than I am. The only color theory I have is basically warm versus cool. I don't do a lot of triads and all of that kind of stuff. So I just really like, the simplest way I can put that, my color theory is, here's a color I like, and there's a color I like. How do they look together? Oh, good, let's use them together. Like, I don't do a lot of color scheming and stuff, which there's nothing wrong with that. If you, in this class, Patty Malika is a whiz. In fact, she writes books about this kind of stuff. She is a whiz about that stuff. So I'll give her my stamp of approval if you want to wander out and get some more color information. Patty Malika is very good at it. Okay, cool. So yeah, I hope you guys, like I said, it's always optional if you guys want to stick around, but I can't imagine, I have to be honest, I can't imagine not doing this. This is how, like, my Wednesdays are my favorite days. I love putting together these slideshows, and I've really, I don't want to use the word lazy, but I've been very remiss. Is that a word? I've been remiss in doing demos. Like, yeah, man, it's like a new, the world is brand new. Let's make stuff instead of just thinking and talking. We've done plenty of thinking and talking. Let's start making some stuff. Okay, so we got a couple of questions of the week. There we go. So Stuart Shills posted this, and Sarah Sally Bees put it up too. We'll go into more detail about this at some point, but I just want to give a quick answer because it's such a pervasive question. Am I really me, or trying to be someone else? That's kind of the finding your voice. I have a really good long answer. I won't do it today. That I think will help you guys. The short answer is, you can neither be entirely yourself, nor can you be someone else. So don't worry about it. The first answer is don't worry about it. The second answer is, you have to be like someone else. You don't get to just be entirely yourself, because nobody will understand a thing you're doing. The trick is not to be too much like someone else, or not to get to the point where your primary effort is to imitate. What you want your primary effort to be is to express, to do, to articulate your own experiences. Well, often you'll find an artist, that's what happened with me and Diebenkorn. You'll find an artist who almost perfectly articulates your experience. Well, then, yeah, you need to study that person, and you need to figure out what it is that they're doing and what you can integrate into your own. But then at a certain point, you're kind of chasing them around a little bit too much. That's great. Sarah Salaviz just said, Jenny Nelson's husband said the same thing. Yeah, don't worry about it. It's like, there are things you already do that everybody does. You probably drive a car. You probably eat breakfast. You probably use a telephone. You probably speak English. Like, you never say to yourself, oh man, am I too much like everybody else? Maybe I should stop driving a car and start flying a spaceship, or some kind of thing like that. Like, there's a certain amount of art that you don't have a choice. You have to speak in the language of the tribe that's already been established long before you were born. They were establishing these things. So you have to speak the language. And then on the other side of that is just don't let your primary influence, like the thing you are articulating, it's not your job to rehash someone else's story, which that gets, you'll know how it feels. We've all done it when you're over imitating somebody. So anyway, that's for another day, but I just wanted to put those fears to rest. Facing your fears in the studio, Stuart says, you can't do either of those. You cannot be really you. There's no such thing as full autonomy. I mean, some people get close, some really eccentric people, but and likewise, you cannot perfectly imitate another person. So one day we'll have a longer conversation. Now here, Margaret is hitting on what we're doing today, and I wanted to make a bigger display of this because you can't really see on the Facebook page what Margaret did, but this is what we're going to do today. This is actually the assignment for today. So let me zoom in on these a little bit, and I want to point out a few things while we're here. This is another kind of question of the week. Oh, sorry, let me go back to the. Margaret says, the trouble comes in phase 4 when the judge tramples all over the muse. I suspect this is when the judge becomes okay, so first of all, Margaret, the judge did not trample all over the muse. The judge did what we were just talking about in #feedback. He just swooped in at the very end and fixed a couple things up. I think that's what you want. I suspect this is when the judge becomes a literalist, wants to cling to faithfully representing the reference material. When does one banish the reference material? Perfect question. That's what we were just talking about a little bit too. So obviously, let's just let these soak in because not everyone saw them close up on the Facebook page. There's the reference, which is very precise. There's a lot of little sharp bits that would be easy to copy. Here's Margaret's first iteration, very Muse driven, but still recognizable, at least the scissors. I could tell that those are scissors. How long ago was thread 35 cents? Isn't that great? So some recognizability. I don't know that I would call that the judge just yet, but certainly the Muse is behaving herself on those scissors. And then, like this probably, I think Margaret even said, like by stage 4, the judge got a little over aggressive. This is where, if this were my painting, I would put it away. At this point, it's very hard to do that, but I would put it in my painting pile and just wait. Sometimes it's months. It's been years before that I'm flipping through my 98% finished pile and something comes out and I think, oh, you know what? I could sure finish that. But before we go on to the last one, notice that Margaret has, whoops. Oh, I can't really do it the other way. No, look at the pink spool on the upper middle. She doesn't really make a lot of changes from, the Muse version of that pink spool. I'm sorry, the lighter pink, the higher up spool, the bigger spool. And here it hasn't changed. And here it really hasn't changed. That's the goal. Anything that you can keep that the Muse has done, you want to hang on to that. And then let the judge kind of make a decision. So for instance, I think the circle And I know, Margaret, you didn't put this up for hashtag feedback, but I just can't resist because it's so much what we're doing today. This piece, whoops, sorry. You know, the judge came in and did that. I think that was a good choice. Judge came in and did that. I think that was a good choice. And maybe even like probably not necessary. I feel like that one got a little bit more rendered than it needed to. And the scissors, but let's just look at it all by itself. Muse, 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 Muse. Tons of Muse type stuff. And then Judge. Just a little tiny bit of Judge. It may not have had to be quite, you may have let the Judge explain just a little, just like one little tiny shred too much, but that's okay. Nobody's really going to know. That's a very subtle difference, but that's a gorgeous painting. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And the assignment this week is based very much on what Margaret's doing here. Give the judge like 5% of the real estate to do his thing, to make his explanation. Don't let him explain anything else except vaguely. So I do think, Margaret, like something in here, let's see if I can sort of split the difference here. Sure, I'm putting a little dot in the middle of that spool. I think you get away with it. And even there, I think we're kind of flirting with a little too much. But then like with the scissors, each little stroke should just come. I'm arguing, I would suggest, the judge has to fight for every single little stroke he's going to make. So if it's, what else did you have there? You know, some highlights, some sharpening, clarifying of the surrounding lines. And don't let this get out of hand. So already at that point, like where it is right now, that's pretty close, could be finished. And if you need to push it further, like let the judge, as I was just saying, let the judge come out. I don't know if we need that circle in that spool, the bluish spool. Let the judge come out and make one choice, one little definition line on the scissors, and then stop. Like right there, that could be done, or at least I think that's pretty close. So I think this is a amazing and fantastic painting. But as far as what we're talking about and what we're going to do today, I would love to see this much of the scissors go back toward the Muse a bit. In fact, I think I can chop that little circle out. See if I can get the right one here. Hallelujah, it did. Sorry, my layers are all weird. There we go. So you see, I didn't quite get it in the right spot, and it's a little off. But I took the sharper finish from the finished one and just laid it over the top. That's what we're going for today. And even there, see, there's like a rhythm. And again, I apologize for the white. I messed this up a little bit. Let me get rid of it. Even within the scissors themselves, there is a prioritized finish and a less prioritized finish. More judge is happening on that upper section than on the bottom section. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you some examples of some artists who do this really, really well to try to get you excited about giving it a shot. And then that's going to be our assignment this week. So just quickly, a couple other great things that are happening on the Facebook page. This I wanted to mention because Nancy said here something about being loose. If you have your iPad and if you know how to use Procreate, paint sloppy, loose Procreate drawings because that will seep in. You'll get this this muscle memory of looseness. Then there are so many things that I can do now in Paint that I can only do because I did them in Procreate first, that I kind of taught myself how to be loose and how to sketch and things like that, that when I, here's the actual painting, which is maybe, Nancy, maybe my favorite painting you've ever done, which is, I've known you for a long time, that's saying a lot. That's what we're going for. That blue, you see the blue door, that's that little thing we're doing today. Just that final little bit of finish. But look, she didn't noodle around on the steps. She didn't render all of the banisters in the balcony. The one thing that feels explained is that blue door. And it could even be more explained. If she wanted to put a little doorknob on there or something, that'd be fine. But that's what we're shooting for this week, is to let the muse, however you want to interpret, you'll see in these slides many different interpretations. Let the muse just roam free, and then at the last second, let the judge come in, do his one tiny little bit of explanation, and then get out of there. Here's a great one. Debbie, same thing, the energy. I think somebody even said that on the Facebook page. Amazing energy. Look at all, like the muse is everywhere, but those sharp edges on the primary house, that's the judge's job. And you probably could, I don't know if I can fake this. Let me see. I have to annotate it. You know, you could have some little bit someplace. I'm just doing this in the keynote, so I can't really change like what color that is. I mean, I can change it to red or something like that. But that's the idea, is that the judge comes in. I was joking about this before class. Like, there are these characters in movies where some famous writer or something, or Waiting for Guffman, that kind of thing. So some famous judge shows up just at the very end and waves his hand. Oh, we just changed this one little thing, and then off he goes. That's the idea. Let the judge come in and make one little tiny adjustment, and off he goes. But wonderful, Debbie. Wonderful, Ethan. I had mentioned the reason I want to bring these next few up. It's going to get us into our slideshow. A lot of this loose, for lack of a better term, this loose type brush work and everything works. It's so much easier if you have a very simple structure. If the shapes, people can be a challenge. If you're trying to do this on a figure and you don't have a lot of experience with figures, it might, now you're juggling a lot of balls that you may not be able to keep going all at the same time. But if you radically simplify, that's why I did those examples that were just like circles and stars, and you just fill them in. This is how you then apply that. Go find something that's dead simple, and then you can you have all sorts of room to roam, because you know that you're going to get the drawing right, or you know that the image is going to work. And so we'll see some other examples of this in a second. And here, Jane, wonderful Jane. I've known Jane. I don't know Jane. I've known you for more than 15 years, longer than I've had a son, who just turned 16, by the way. He's getting his license today. Stay off the sidewalks. But it's that, like, I know that's a jar. I don't need any more explanation than what you've given me. I know that's a jar. And I know that it's like a cylinder, and I know everything about that. Jane just said we are old. Yeah, it's starting to feel that way. Having a kid with a driver's license, that'll do it to you. But it's like that's a very accessible set of shapes. So then the interior of those shapes can be really, you have a lot of room to wiggle. And so Jane did wiggle within that space. So again, this is the idea, right? That if you're struggling with any of these exercises, or if you're struggling with anything in general, man, it sure helps to just make it easier on yourself. So here are some artists who do that. Lois Dodd is a very famous one. I saw she did, I didn't see the interview, but if you get a chance, I think Catherine Kehoe has it on her website, but there's an interview with Lois Dodd and Wayne Thiebaud. Yeah, no big deal, right? 200 years of experience in an interview. But yeah, you see, so what I'm drawing attention to right now, everything that is not the sheet or whatever that is hanging on the line, with the maybe kind of the possible exception of a little bit of that window, all the rest of it is just the first try. It's all Muse stuff. Everything else, there's probably, if you needed to, the only judge I would say is kind of that window stuff, and maybe a little bit of what's on the sheet, and maybe the line. Even the line's not really, meaning the clothesline is not really that clearly rendered. And so this is in a perfect spot. The judge could come and put a little more information in that sheet or a little bit more clarity in the clothesline or whatever, but why bother? Like that's all that open, clear stuff. Oh, isn't that great? Dina just said she makes me think of a simplified version of Andrew Wyeth. It is. It's that kind of East Coast American realist, like this is the world as it is kind of stuff. That would be that'd be a fun comparison to do Wyeth and Lois Dodd side by side. They have a lot of motifs in common as well. Here's another Lois Dodd. Look at that mess. Look at everything under that right side cloth. And actually look at anything that's green. All of the green stuff is just mess, mess, mess. And I'll give you another preview of what we're doing for the assignment this week. This is like that. There's only maybe 5% of the painting that is explained. And it's that 5% that does the job. We know what we're looking at. And otherwise, she's just letting herself go completely loose. So Sarah Sally Bees had asked a question. All right, before I do this, I'm going to set up. I have a question for all of you. I know we're all going to agree on the answer of this, but just for the sake of doing it, I'm going to show you a painting that I just accidentally showed you by Cy Twombly, and I want you to answer the question as quickly as possible. I believe there's a piece of this painting that is finished. Quote, like imagine it's not a representational painting, it's an abstract, but there's a piece of it that's finished. I bet we all agree where it is. Ready, set, go. Yeah, it's the red part, I think. Like it's kind of hard to argue any other piece of it feeling finished. The rest of it's just expressionistic mess. But there's a finished piece. There's a tiny little that punctuation. So it's not just representational painting, and it's not just geometric. It's not just any of the stuff we're looking at. It's the attention you're giving. It's the judge coming out and quote finishing. And Annette just asked, yeah, finished or most eye-catching. I would say that's a very good question. My answer would be those are kind of the same thing. They got to be careful. There's some artists who don't do it that way. You sort of want your finish to be where people look. That's, I guess, my point. The explanation, and that may be like a bit of a bias of my own that I need to look at, that I just assume that that's true. But when we talk about a focal point, that's the whole idea of a focal point, is you're supposed to pause on that spot. And so finishing something sends the message to the viewer that they're supposed to pause. And so I think in this Cy Twombly, whether he did it intentionally or not, I feel like he is, thank you, Ethan, articulated bits. They don't just draw the eye, they also, I've said this a million times, they stop it. Your eye goes there, like, think about how you're navigating this painting right now. There's not a lot to look at that you can stop on other than that red dot. Everything else is in motion and kind of swooping and sweeping. You might be able to focus on a word here and there or some outline or something like that, but it's pretty clear that the place you're supposed to stop is that red point. And I've said this a million times. I don't have a better way to say it than I've always said it. When you stop the eye, give people something to look at. Pull them in and then deliver. And that's what Cy Twombly's doing here. And so this, however you want to interpret this week's assignment, you can do it abstractly, you can do it representationally, you can do it with simple shapes, you can do it with complex shapes. Thank you, Kathleen. The energy coalesces at that point. I would say that too. I often describe this as, how when the solar system's being formed, this is a bit arbitrary. When a planet is, the core is the hottest, it's the tightest, that everything spins around. Same thing with the galaxy. At the center, it's sort of the hot core, and then everything else is just kind of spiraling satellite around it. That's the idea, is that it is thank you, Kathleen, again. She says the energy coalesces at that point, and that's why I don't like the term focal point, because it isn't just your eye. It's not just, you're not just putting a candle in the window and saying, hey, that's what you're supposed to look at. You are seizing attention. That's another way that we could say it, that you are taking 5%, and you're using the judge to do it. You're using 5% of the square footage of the painting The judge is coming in, and basically, you know how judges get attention? They bang the gavel, right? You're kind of like banging the gavel in this spot saying, order, order, attention, attention. Here's where I want you to look. Here's a wonderful Cezanne. Thanks to Sarah Salabis for finding this one for me a while back. And in fact, I have, here, this book. Cezanne, Finished, Unfinished. Wonderful book. It's expensive. I got it used. I think it was like $120. But anyway, if it's good enough for Cezanne, you may have heard of that guy. It's good enough for you. This idea that he's only explaining what we are looking at with that tiny little space, I would argue, there. Without that articulation, I mean, we'd know what it was because we know Cezanne does these mountains. Sorry, I'm not in Procreate, but like if you just take this one thing away, it still looks kind of like a landscape, but we all know that's Mont Sainte-Victoire. Thanks for tolerating my murdered French. But this is the idea of this week, is that you are inarticulate muse, whether you want to just leave some of these examples. They just left the canvas showing through. In some of the examples, it's just really expressionistic, loose, non-explanatory brushwork. However you want to interpret this. You can go back and fast forward through the YouTube video if you need some ideas. There's the book, Finished, Unfinished. Another Cezanne. I want to throw this in there because this is something we talked about in the one-on-ones, in both of the one-on-ones, both with Lori and Anne this week. You want people to pay attention. Most of what we think we're supposed to do knocks the edges off of stuff. And so people don't pay attention. I'm watching a masterclass with the graphic designer, and he says, perfect design is perfectly forgettable. That if it's flawless, we tend not to really pay much attention to it because it's just machine-like, it's flawless. When it is like this, I find these Cezannes far more compelling, even though I love all of Cezanne's work. These Cezannes to me are way more exciting because of that. And we talked about this like resonant omissions, because of what he's not finishing and what he's not explaining to us. And we looked at this last week, this wonderful prisoner. I'm changing my word from what I used last week. Now I know that the more appropriate word is prisoner, but that he's only articulating, I mean, for the day, Michelangelo still had to have some muscles in there and stuff like that, but he's really only articulating the minimal amount of information that would have been acceptable. It probably wasn't acceptable at the time, but by modern standards, we can certainly tolerate that kind of finish. Here, wonderful. David Hockney. You could probably just Google David Hockney, especially his drawings. He does this all the time. Where I want you to notice the finish on the window. And notice there's no modeling on the chair other than a few little contour lines. There's no shading, so to speak. There's no shading or modeling in the curtains. And even he stops halfway up on the window. You see how on that left side of the window sill, he has drawn up to there, and then he stops. And so you can his only real articulation is just up to the top left of the chair. I mean, it's an etching, so the articulation, it can't be quite so expressionistic necessarily as some of the other stuff with paint that we're looking at. But that's the idea, it's so hard to resist, isn't it? If this were your etching or drawing, wouldn't you want to fill in those windowsills completely? Well, this week is all about resisting this. Kathleen says, can we ask him what made him stop, when and where he stops? Yeah, let me call him. I got him on speed dial. I call him Dave. Me and Dave, we're close, man. Yeah, I think he's probably asleep right now. But anyway, next time we'll ask him. Jennifer Puczynski, I'm going to ask that same question. Where is it finished? I have one answer. I only have one answer, and I maybe could stretch that answer to the middle face. It's that left face of that guy with the light, the white, bluish white t-shirt. It's the eyebrows and the nose. We talk a lot about how much to finish the face. I don't feel like there's another square inch in this painting that feels finished. And maybe the arm, Dina's asking, I don't think so though, because it doesn't feel, it doesn't, if that were a black line, let me try faking this. If this were more defined, I'd say yeah. Like that the arm could be, you know what I mean? Like if that had a distinct edge, then I could probably buy the thought that that was finished. But I don't, it's too sloppy, and it's too, in a good way, it's too aggressive, too expressionistic. I feel like that face, this right there, that to me is the only really finished spot. And if I can't zoom in on these, but if I zoomed in on the bottom 5/8 of this painting, you'd have no idea what we were looking at. It's that one little bit of finish, that explanatory, even if it's not like fully explanatory. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Gene. That Tracy Everly, another wonderful painter, Tracy Everly, said that when you first hear the word stop, stop. Or even long before that. I have my whole painting process set up to be constantly distracted. This is why I never finish any paintings. But you don't have to not finish paintings. You can finish your paintings. I was shocked today looking through some Yuan Yuglo paintings, thinking to myself, there's no way, there's not going to be a Yuan Yuglo painting that is unfinished, because that guy was like really, I want to use the term OCD, you know, like he was really devoted to finishing every square inch. Well, here's one that's not finished. And how exciting is it because it's not finished? I know what that is. And I know, like, I don't have to interpret any aspect of that. It makes complete sense to me. And it's even more exciting to me because there's less being explained. Really, the dome is about it. I mean, there's some outlining on some of the structure, but the dome is clear. And then he's even like leaving part of the dome out. So here it is. Here it is. This is where I first learned it as a kid or as a teenager. I would be looking at these books of Sargent, and like everyone who looks at Sargent, focusing only on the face, focusing only on the hands. And then after a couple of years, I start realizing, look just to the left, under the table, of what old Sargent is up to. That's that same as what Lois Dodd was doing in that earlier piece. He's just filling in space. And then you start looking around for other examples. That was kind of Sargent's genius, is that he could paint anything like that. Look at that table. Here's the bigger image. Most people, I think, would look at that and think, oh, wow, that's a nice, look at the table with all that ornamentation. Well, there's not much there. He's just slightly explaining. So I'm not expecting any of you to do a John Singer Sargent imitation, but I just want you to know that this is not like this. This is a transcendent thought beyond just representational, impressionistic, expressionistic, whatever. He's articulating the face and the hands, and maybe a bit of that back frame kind of in the middle. He's making a little arc, by the way. That John Singer Sargent knew a thing or two about composition. That everything really articulated is in that channel. You could maybe argue, but he's not really doing much out there. That's his articulation. That's his articulation. And then maybe right there. Everything else is, frankly, pretty sloppy. But that's what makes it so good. And Egon Schiele, I've yet to know exactly how I'm supposed to pronounce his name. Schiele. In fact, I've heard it all different ways, but there's only one really articulate space. Here's another David Hockney. I could have shown 50 David Hockneys that use this approach. He did it all the time. If you really look, the blue stripes to our right, he doesn't even finish those blue stripes. He's doing what I want you guys to do. Hold off on the articulation. You can put anything in that Muse space that you want. It can be expressionistic paint. It can be blank. It can be anything. But I don't want to see, I'm going to hold you guys to this when we do hashtag feedback about this. Don't over articulate. Don't let the judge give you the actuallys. That'll make more sense if you were here earlier. So here, Dina had asked this question, and I keep wanting to come back to it. The idea of a gimmick. I'm going to show you a couple paintings by recently deceased artist. I'm always scared to do this because it's like I'm sure it's somebody's favorite artist. What makes it a gimmick? Like, so let's say we're doing this stuff, and well, what makes it a gimmick versus not a gimmick? I researched the word gimmick today, and some of the fun that I found. If you look at the very bottom, it's a magic term. It's a trick. A gimmick is a trick. And what I would say to you, because it comes up so much, the difference between a gimmick and not a gimmick or authenticity, the gimmick, you have decided ahead of time some kind of novelty, some weird approach that you just bring that in because you want. It's a contrivance. See in the middle there? I don't know. It's kind of small. That's the difference between something that's authentically weird or eccentric or whatever. And when it's a gimmick, it's like you decide ahead of time. So, what if you're at a party, and somebody's got this sort of scripted, ridiculous behavior. You know that the second you see it, you know that they plan that ahead of time versus somebody who's really genuinely, truly ridiculous. So here's this artist. Again, forgive me. I hesitate to trash talk. He's dead, and he has sold more paintings in 1 year of his life than I'll sell in my entire life. This is a guy by the name of Oleg Stavrowski. Sorry, Oleg up in heaven. By all accounts, everybody loves Oleg. He was a very nice guy. But I remember seeing these when I was younger and thinking, what the hell is this? Thanks, Debbie just said it's like a fake accent. Yeah, there's something. So like if you took the cowboy and the horse out of this, I would think, wow, man, what a cool painting. That's a great abstract painting. There's something about it that feels a little premeditated. There's a couple more of his. Here's another. He was just known for this. This is what he did. He was fusing what at the time was probably considered abstract expressionism with hyper, fairly like illustrative realism. Here's another one. And I even remember being like 12 years old and thinking, something about that's really like not being able to articulate what about it felt so weird to me. And it wasn't because it was messy, because there are a lot of messy artists I like. And it wasn't because it wasn't, the draftsmanship was very good. But there's something about it that feels a little contrived, or that feels a little gimmicky, or a little premeditated. Now let's look at a few that are kind of similar in approach that don't feel like that to me at all. Ron Hicks, he's a Denver artist. His Muse space feels very authentic to me. I don't feel like he went in ahead of time knowing where this was going to happen. It just feels like, and this is my answer when you say like, is it gimmicky or not gimmicky? A gimmick, again, it's something you've premeditated, that you've decided, oh, my style is I do these hyper realist illustrative horse and riders, and then I throw a hyper abstract expressionist background on them, and then everything you do, you don't have to think about it. It's just like on autopilot. Ron's piece doesn't feel like autopilot to me at all. He's highly rendering. He's using all of his judge skills to do the face, and then he's using his Muse fun to do the rest of it, and it feels cohesive, and it feels like they belong together. Oh yeah, and Sandra just said, reminds me of the painting over the garage sale art. That's another thing we should talk about at some point. I'm actually sort of a fan of, because it's so absurd, I'm kind of a fan of that. Here's a Jack Ballas. Sorry, I just happened to grab a bunch of Denver artists today. Jack Ballas, same kind of idea. He does this a lot, and in fact, I've often mentioned, if I had any courage, I'd paint more like Jack Ballas. I've got a series from probably 10 years ago when I was trying to integrate, and speaking of like over imitating another artist, they just looked like I was trying to rip him off. So I kind of had to go another direction. But I've always loved this sort of in and out, definition, not definition approach to painting. He does a great job. And I'll, if you want to Google him, this is always, I have to do the what do they call it? The disclaimer. It's not PG-13. Old Jack, he's got some fairly explicit stuff, but hey, man, it's art. Enjoy. Here is Diarmuid Kelly, or somebody just told me how to pronounce this again, and I forgot. It's like deer meat. Somebody told you say deer meat. It's like Dear Kelly. Same thing though. That does not feel. It doesn't feel like he was deciding ahead of time that he was going to leave those drips or that he was going to do that stuff in the background. That feels like part of the process, like something that just happened while he was painting, and then he locked the judge out of this process. Kathleen just said about Jack, the juxtaposition of figures has narrative intrigue. It really does. And it's, again, Jack Ballas is his name, Ballas. You can see it on the bottom left there. Go ahead and Google. You may find that you see something you like in there. But he does this all the time. It's this sort of like narrative, like almost a surrealist narrative approach that's very structural, and he puts a lot of words and numbers in. And so yeah, maybe Sarah Salabis, too many drips start to feel contrived. I agree. So there's something about drips, although I would say in the language of drips, these drips don't feel like he was dripping on purpose. It just looks different when you press the brush hard against the canvas intentionally to make it drip. It does a different kind of drip. When it just happens as the byproduct of your process, it looks like that. Another one of his, there's a lot of really organic, the drips are very organic. The shapes, as we get outside of the articulation zone, to me at least, it feels very organic. He's another, like one of the great living artists doing this thing I'm talking about, the articulate, inarticulate. But we've talked about this before, and I just want to specify that what we're doing this week, the muse is the inarticulate part. The muse is the messy, colorful, energetic, however you want to interpret that, or even just leaving the canvas bare. And then the judge comes in at the very last second, like what we looked at with Margaret's scissors. Let the judge come in and just do one tiny little bit of explaining. And I even want to challenge you guys, like, against each other. Let's see who can do it the most, who can come up with the tiniest bit of judge and the most muse simultaneously, and see what we get. Here's Terry Moira. Speaking of names I have trouble pronouncing, you Los Angeles and California folks know who Terry is. But he's chosen through his cropping and through his destructo moves to focus your attention right there on the hands. And everything else, I suspect the judge got a little overzealous, and then he brought the muse back in, did some destruction. But the hands and the knee, look, the only highlight in the whole painting is right there on the knee. And even de Kooning did it. I wouldn't call the parts outside of the face very calming. They're certainly aggressive. But if I took that face out, it would be tough. It'd take you a minute to interpret this as a figure. And then the teeth, isn't that funny? That's just got those teeth. Here's the other de Kooning. This is Elaine de Kooning. Willem was married to Elaine de Kooning. Same idea, right? Lots of musy, exciting, sloppy, fun, colorful, drippy stuff. And then just a little bit of articulation. Gary Comerin, I'll do that again. As I switch to this painting, let's see if I bet we all mostly agree. There's one piece of this that's kind of finished. Ready? It's that yellow, I think. It's that yellow piece. Because it kind of looks like a little, I'm sure it is actually a little girl's head or a doll or something like that. But there's nothing else really explained or articulated. There's some sharp edges and some shape here and there, but nothing that comes close to that tiny little space. So it doesn't even have to be abstract or representational. It can be kind of from memory, as you're saying, Sarah Salabis, just out of your head. And I just saw this morning. James Bland, who consistently knocks it out of the park. It's just the hand. Look at that. What a wonderful interpretation. Where here's the hand a little closer. Very articulate, very clear. In a painting that must have been extremely tempting to render. There's like a shiny bowl there, a couple faces, at least two faces, possibly a baby face as well. Looks like maybe a mom holding a baby, something like that. But the articulation has been saved just for that one little spot. And I'll say this again, something I've mentioned the last couple of weeks. It's really fun to articulate something people are not expecting. Everybody thinks the face is going to be articulated, hands also, but if you can choose something that is completely arbitrary and weird, that's the piece that's being articulated, even if it's an abstract painting, something unexpected, that gives it a little extra surprise, a little extra punch. Here's Alice Neal does it a lot. And I don't think she's being lazy. It's not like she can't, like, how much more work would it take to fill in that leg with paint or to fill in the bottom of the chair with paint? Right? Not really much. I think she knew she got it to that point and that it was enough. And our buddy Zoe Frank, Paul's not here today. I was going to joke. I can hear Paul's eyes rolling back in his head. To me, this painting feels like there's one finished part. I bet as you guys are looking for it, you think the same part is finished that I do. It is that. Oh, somebody said the hibiscus. I don't even know where the hibiscus is. You know what? I just think it's that fish here. I'll let you guys look at it for another second. To me, the fish, when I kind of close move my eyes out of focus, the fish becomes very clearly, and it's the eye. There's some like articulation, and it's sort of the most clear. There's another fish right here. And it's actually the painting. If you missed this from a couple weeks ago, it's the same scene. There's a lot of repetition. Here's that hand. Like it's a diptych, but it's the same. It's essentially the same imagery, just reproduced side by side, which is another pretty cool trick. But yeah, it's over. I think Sarah Sally B said something about overload. Lori, you don't have to love it. That's fine. I don't love everything Zoe does either, but I'm compelled by it. That's maybe the point that I'd like to make, is that as I said when I was gushing about Zoe that one week, the beauty of Zoe's work is you never doubt that everything is there on purpose, and everything she's doing is like her intelligence is in control of your perception. And I love that feeling. Even if I don't totally love the painting. I certainly wouldn't make something like this. And I wouldn't want it. I mean, if she gave it to me, I'd take it, but it's not like that. But I take it very seriously because she takes it very seriously. That's another conversation for another time. I was just more interested in the fisheye. All right, coming up, another Cy Twombly. I want you guys to think for just a second. What might be finished? I think it's... Oh, sorry. I think it's that. There are other candidates for possibly finished, maybe even that. But for me, it was pretty easy for me. And that he's not doing... The only thing he's doing, he's got other scratchy squares, and we're almost done. He's got other scratchy squares, and he's got other empty squares, and he's got other scratches. But there's something about this finish. Yes, dark and dense, Sarah Salabese. That's right. He's drawing your attention to that spot. And here's Jennifer Kuczynski, same kind of thing. I'll just rush through the end because we're out of time. Here's another Ron Hicks, a gorgeous Ron Hicks. All of that Muse stuff feels super intentional. It doesn't feel gimmicky at all. And it's a testament to the thought that you can be hyper or photorealistic in a couple little spots, or even like romantic, expressionistic, whatever you want to do, and then just let the rest of the painting go where it's going to go. There's a lot of amazing stuff happening in that painting. So here's our assignment, and then we're done. I challenge you all, however you want to do it, if you want to see if you can find something that fits this approach. But we want to see, yes, Klimt would be a good choice, Sarah Salabese. I want to have a dialogue about how far can we push this idea? How small can the judge be and still be effective? How large, meaning square inches, space, how large can the muse be and do her job? So it's not just like a 50-50 where this whole time we've been talking about the muse and the judge cooperating. We almost all of us have a tendency to think the judge is going to be in charge like 90% of the time, but we'll let the muse show up 10%. You know, we'll throw the muse a bone, let her do a little something. This is the opposite of that. I want 99.8 if you think you can pull it off, muse, and then 0.2 if I'm doing the math right, judge. And see if you can let that judge stay out of the process as long as possible, and then come in and whatever skill you have for articulation, do it. Put that in there. All right. If you have questions about that, we can, you know, if Monday comes along and nobody's quite feeling like they're able to do it, or we haven't had enough time or something, we'll stretch it out a little bit. But all of these exercises are important because I think it's important to learn like compartmentalization while you're painting, to think, you know, this is a space that doesn't matter. That's a space that doesn't matter. I'm not going to put a lot of energy, because then that saves the energy you need and the articulation and all of that where it counts. And then you can use that skill for all kinds of stuff. All right. Great. Thanks, folks. We will see you soon. Have a good rest of your week. Wish me luck. My son will have a license when I go upstairs. I'm scared to death, and he's going to go driving all by himself. Let's hope everything is okay. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.